The past couple of stories that I've shared with you about the Supreme Court rulings have not been good. I think we can all agree to that. This one, however, is a good one. Do you remember the Sackler family? The Sackler family, big pharma peeps, they produced Oxycontin. Remember that started a whole opioid epidemic in this country? Remember that family? Probably haven't heard about them in a while, right? Well, Congress had decided to try to hold them accountable. I thought it was a weak way of holding them accountable. Personally, I think the Sackler family should be under the jail. They are responsible for the death of thousands and thousands of people in this country, all for greed and profit. And even after they were told multiple times that their drug was unsafe, they continued to push it for years. So they have killed a lot of people in this country. So as far as I'm concerned, Richard Sackler and the rest of his family members shouldn't even be allowed to breathe above the ground. They should be under the jail. That being said, the Supreme Court has just released a ruling against the Sackler family. They were somewhat protected even after Congress had a hearing with them. They were protected against bankruptcy. Now that is no longer the case. Let's get into this clip here. And again, I think they should be under the jail. Here we go.
I do want to break away from our conversation just for a moment to get back out to Pamela Brown and Ellie Honig, because we have a new decision coming down from the Supreme Court. They have rejected the multi-billion-dollar Purdue Pharma opioid settlement. Is that right? That shielded the Sackler family. That's going to be very controversial. Pamela, what can you tell us?
That's right. The Supreme Court rejected this controversial settlement, Jim, that essentially, on one hand, would have sent billions of dollars to treatment programs and victims of the nation's opioid epidemic, but also it would have shielded the Sackler family from future lawsuits. So what we're learning right now is that the Supreme Court rejected this, and this, Ellie Honig, to bring you in, is a win for the Biden administration.
It is, because the Biden administration had challenged this settlement, Pam. So just so people sort of have the context here, Purdue Pharma is the manufacturer of Oxycontin. And they've been sued and had legal proceedings brought against them by the United States Justice Department. They also entered into bankruptcy. And as part of a bankruptcy agreement, Purdue Pharma agreed to give up $4-point-something billion to go to treatment. But they also got a benefit in that agreement, which is that future claims, future lawsuits against them were exterminated, were extinguished in advance. And part of the agreement that the bankruptcy court agreed to is, okay, you're going to give up all this money, but future people cannot sue you for this. And the Biden administration challenged that, and the Supreme Court has now agreed with the Biden administration. The Supreme Court has said you cannot extinguish future lawsuits. And the sort of lineup of justices is really interesting here. Completely cross-ideological both ways. The majority is Justices Gorsuch, Thomas, Alito, Barrett, and Jackson. That's a group you don't see often together. The dissenters are Justices Kavanaugh, the Chief Justice Roberts, along with Sotomayor and Kagan.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, you're never going to see this alignment again.
You don't see that. And let me just follow up, because for the viewer that might hear, but wait, it's rejecting the settlement that would give billions of dollars to victims of the opioid epidemic and treatment programs. What about that?
Well, so first of all, it sends them essentially back to the drawing board. They're now going to have to try to come up with a different bankruptcy agreement, but the court's judgment is it's unlawful, it's unconstitutional to cut off the rights of people who might sue in the future, but just haven't sued yet. That's really...
Pause for a second here. I want you to think about the judges that voted in favor of the Sackler family, that voted against, I would say against the victims and the victims' family members. I would be interested to see if any of those justices had some type of connection with Big Pharma. Because essentially this is where you have to follow the money. Because if those justices had some type of connection with Big Pharma in any way, shape, or form, that would explain why they voted in favor of protecting the Sackler family instead of protecting the victims. And this is why we need the corporate money out, whether it's justices, whether it's politicians, etc. You never know a lot of times where some of this money is coming from or who they are connected to. Sometimes it's just a favor, such as you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. You protect us, we'll protect you. Sometimes it's just something like that, but you never know sometimes. That being said, I want to be very clear what happened here. This was a very wealthy family. There are multiple buildings in this country, some have been changed, that were named after the Sackler family, including one of them at Tufts University here in Massachusetts. These people had museum halls named after their family because they were known for giving donations to the arts and all this kind of stuff. These people killed people, and they targeted certain groups of people. They started out with Oxycontin when they started to distribute it. You know who they decided to test this on? People that lived in rural America. Towns and places like West Virginia or the western part of Virginia. They went to places where they knew that people had jobs where they would get physically hurt and they would need something for pain. So typically places where people worked in industries such as like the lumber industry. Obviously that requires a lot of physical ability. Let's just keep it real. The mining industry, people who are working in the coal mines, places like Kentucky and stuff like that. These people are bound to get injured at some point in time because of the job that they have. A lot of these people are just poor or poor working class. So you had a rich family target poor working class people and use them as their test dummies. The Sackler family didn't give a damn about these people. When these people died and their relatives spoke out, they defended themselves. And this also goes back to the FDA warning where they paid off an employee at the FDA to put a specific label on their product to basically cover them and shield them from any of these lawsuits if people were to die. They were warned before this was put onto the market. They were warned that it wasn't safe. They were warned, listen, this is what's happening in the test trials. So they use their money and their wealth and their connections and their networks to put it on the market anyway. The Sackler family wasn't trying to help people. The Sackler family was trying to maintain wealth and become wealthier. And it disgusts me till this day that these people are not under the jail for what they did. This went on for over 20 years, fam. Over 20 years. Let's continue.
The gist of the decision here.
All right, so a win for the Biden administration, as you just laid out. Ellie Honig, back to you, Jim.
All right, Pamela, Ellie, thank you very much. And Gloria, I mean, this opioid issue it's a massive issue across this country, and it's one that maybe we just don't cover enough. The damage, the
movies have been
wreckage,
made about it,
movies, and so on.
Right. Look, people want the opportunity. Big Pharma is not popular, and people want the opportunity to be able to sue Big Pharma. And the Biden administration said, look, we don't want to cut it off at any particular point. And I think, when you look at what's gone on in the court so far, and again, we haven't had the immunity case,
right,
but the Biden administration has done okay, and which is sort of surprising to some people. Again, we don't have the immunity case, but the Biden administration folks are not disappointed in a lot of these rulings.
Yeah. And Jamie, we are waiting not only the immunity decision that pertains to the January 6th case, but this other January 6th case, which is also very important.
Right.
Yeah.
That one is a little more complicated.
This is what bothered me here with this discussion that I wanted to show you. Okay. They took this opportunity to start to pivot into some of the other Supreme Court rulings instead of focusing more on the Sackler family. Part of the reason why this took as long as it did is because there are too many politicians that are in the back pocket of Big Pharma. I'm talking over 20 years before they were finally even held somewhat accountable. And that was not enough. There were people working on this case for years. And to see this family constantly just be protected, that's what happens when you're rich. That's what happens when you have so many different networks. You can't be touched. It took family after family after family protesting against the Sackler family, protesting against Purdue Pharma, protesting outside of the halls of Congress. And that took years before Congress even decided to take any type of action. And that happened over the course of the pandemic. These people were never held fully accountable, all because they're rich, and it's not right. All these people died. You got people in prison that I would argue really don't need to be in prison. But you got people walking around roaming the streets that should be, but they're not because they have money. And that's the country that we live in. I want to go to this here as well. They tried to make it about the Biden family. Going into this article here, Supreme Court rejects the controversial Purdue Pharma bankruptcy deal. And I want you to see this picture. These are just some of the family members that lost family members because of the Sackler family, because of OxyContin. And you can see the picture. You would think, I thought they cared about our troops. Here's one who was a Marine, right? All these people, they lost all of these family members. It's a hot mess. The U.S. Supreme Court on Thursday invalidated a controversial bankruptcy deal involving Purdue Pharma, maker of the highly addictive painkiller OxyContin, and members of the Sackler family who owned the scandal-plagued drug firm. By a vote of 5-4, the justices threw out the bankruptcy settlement, which has been valued between $6 billion and $10 billion. Writing for the court majority, Gorsuch said U.S. bankruptcy law does not afford bankruptcy courts the kind of power needed to block lawsuits against parties who haven't filed for bankruptcy. The bankruptcy code does not authorize a release and injunction that, as part of a plan of reorganization under Chapter 11, effectively seek to discharge claims against non-debtor without the consent of affected claimants. Gorsuch added that if Congress intended to grant this level of power to bankruptcy courts, it might have done so. Had Congress been or meant to reshape traditional practice so profoundly in the present bankruptcy code, extending to the courts and the capacious new power the plan proponents claim, one might have expected it to say so expressly. Writing for the dissenters, this is Justice Kavanaugh, said the ruling disrupts a deal that would have funneled money to communities and victims of the opioid crisis. Today's decision is wrong on the law and devastating for more than 100,000 opioid victims and their families. But Melissa Jacoby, who teaches bankruptcy law at UNC, said the opinion wasn't a surprise. Ultimately, what the majority of the court did does follow the rule of law and what's actually in the bankruptcy code. That view was shared by Jonathan Lipson, a critic of Purdue bankruptcy settlement who teaches law at Temple University. The result is simply based on the language of the law. You see a strong dissent from Justice Kavanaugh, which reflects how emotional and difficult this case has been for hundreds of thousands of people. Opioid victims will have to wait. The bankruptcy deal would have provided roughly $8 billion to state and local governments for dealing with the consequences of opioid addiction. It also would have provided a total of $750 million in individual compensation to the victims. Ryan Hampton, who was addicted to OxyContin, is now in recovery, supported the bankruptcy plan. He told NPR he understands the desire of many opioid victims to sue the Sacklers, but he worries that legal chaos following this ruling could delay payouts for years. Let me say something really quick here. This was incredibly addictive. So much to the point where people felt like they were losing their mind if they didn't have it. And what they were telling these patients is that if you have more pain, we'll just increase your dose. As powerful and as addictive as this drug already were. So just imagine if you were one of the people where they continued to increase your dose. Then eventually it got to the point where people were buying it off the street. People were going to other states to try to get it, to buy it off the street. This is how dangerous this was. And I really believe, and I've said this before, the fact that it took like 20 years for them to actually, for Congress to really step in and hold this family somewhat accountable. I've always questioned this and said to myself, do they want people to die? Is this their way of saying, okay, we need to decrease the population? Is that why? Do they just want people to die? We need to start asking this question. Let's continue. So he went on to say, I do have a fear that it could be another year or two, Hampton said. It is important for everyone to get to the table and negotiate something that puts victims first very quickly. Most of the settlement would have been funded by members of the Sackler family who owned and ran Purdue Pharma and agreed to pay $6 billion into the compensation pot. In exchange, the Sacklers would have been shielded from personal liability, even though six Sackler family members served on the company's board, including Chairman Richard Sackler, who closely directed the firm's aggressive and deceptive marketing strategy for OxyContin as a painkiller that was not addictive. And that was the key part there, the not addictive part. That's what they were able to argue, even though it was addictive. They were blaming the patients. They were saying, well, some of those patients must just have addictive personalities, and that's why they were addicted to it. That was a damn lie. And they knew it, and they pushed it anyway. The Sackler family says they'll keep negotiating. This is one of the Sacklers here. This is Kathy Sackler. And this is when she testified to the House Oversight Committee. It's virtual because that was during the pandemic, just FYI. In a statement sent to NPR, members of the Sackler family who have denied any wrongdoing in management of Purdue Pharma voiced disappointment. The Sackler family remains hopeful about reaching a resolution that provides substantial resources to help combat a complex public health crisis. The unfortunate reality is that the alternative is costly and chaotic legal proceedings in courtrooms across the country. Family members said negotiations towards a settlement will continue. How long are those negotiations supposed to take place? Because this is how I see it. I don't give a damn if they're bankrupt. They owe those families. They have plenty of wealth. They can give it to them. They owe those families. You killed people. They killed people. And they preyed on people that they knew would have pain. This is why to this day, some people refuse to take pain medication. This is why some people won't do it. But they had doctors, they pushed it on the doctors pushed it onto their patients. That's what pharmaceutical sales reps do. They go to the doctors, they push it on the doctors. Can you give this to your patients? Essentially, they're pushers. That's what you have. It goes on to say here, Purdue Pharma also issued a statement voicing dismay over the opinion. Today's ruling is heart-crushing because it invalidates a settlement supported by nearly all of our creditors. It is accurate that 95% of the victims who voted as part of the Purdue Pharma bankruptcy process ultimately agreed to the settlement. But in the majority opinion, Gorsuch noted that only 20% of OxyContin victims cast votes. Also, the remaining 5% objected, contending the bankruptcy court exceeded its authority in allowing the Sacklers to hold on to half of their wealth and escape further liability. Let's hold on to this. It allowed the Sackler family to hold on to half of their wealth and escape further liability. They should have never been able to hold on to half of their wealth. That allowed the Sackler family to continue to live the life that they were living. That allowed them to still continue to have nice houses, maids, cars. live a lavish lifestyle that allowed them to continue to do that. Why should you get to keep half of your wealth after you've killed hundreds of thousands of people? A major precedent for U.S. bankruptcy law. The deal was also opposed by the U.S. Justice Department Bankruptcy Watchdog Agency, which argued the deal would have violated victims' constitutional rights to due process. On Thursday, the Supreme Court validated the DOJ position. Experts say the decision will have far-reaching implications for an overdose crisis that still kills more than 100,000 people in the U.S. every year. This is absolutely going to put the brakes on so-called parasitic bankruptcies, where a non-bankrupt entity like the Sackler family tries to piggyback on a bankruptcy. That came from Adam Levitin, who teaches law at Georgetown University. And I want to say this. When we talk about the victims and their constitutional rights. If you want people to have the right to due process, you cannot put forth measures that prevents certain people, because they are wealthy, from being sued. Because at the end of the day, they should be bankrupt. The Sackler family should be bankrupt, and they should be ashamed of themselves. I researched this story very heavily, and I got to tell you, some of the victims, some of the things that happened to the victims, especially those that were asking for help, and for this company to continue to operate, lie after lie, paying off people, paying off politicians. Yes, the Sackler had certain politicians in their back pocket. Rudy Giuliani was one of them. It shows you who's really in charge. That's what it does. It's a hot mess. Again, it's not full justice. I think they should be in jail. But now we know that because of this SCOTUS ruling, that other people can sue them now going forward. What a mess.